Hello, everybody, and we are live. Hi there from sunny Connecticut. That's Eleuterio. We've got people coming in from all over the world. Numbers are climbing rapidly. There's Ray coming in. Good day, everyone. Ray says, Ray's in the house. I tell you, today is it's May the 1st, so it's a bank holiday in many places around Europe. There's Euro going on, so wishing you all the best, everybody who's at Euro. And we've got some exciting news to share right at the start of the show. A number of our viewers say to us that they love our show, but it's a bit difficult with the time zone if they're based in Asia or in Australia. So starting this week, we are going to be doing the View from the Top Recast, which will be a repeat of the show, and that will be going out at 4 p.m. Singapore time, which is 6 p.m. Sydney time tomorrow. So you're either watching us live now, or you're watching us semi-live tomorrow morning, my time, in which case, g'day. So hopefully we'll get lots of people coming in from Asia and from Australia and New Zealand, around the world. So today's show, we've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about managing ambiguity in global mobility. We're going to be talking about when the answer isn't yes or no, when actually the answer is you don't know quite what's going to happen, which in many cases is actually what life is really all about. So I'm super excited. We've got on the show with us today, we've got Stephanie Ortiz-Minami from Seagen that actually got acquired by Pfizer. And we're going to be talking about her personal experiences of weathering ambiguity and also from a corporate perspective. So it's a great show. Everybody, you know how it works. Please join in the conversation. I can see many of you doing that already. Write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, tell us what's going on in your world. It's a great show we've got lined up for you today. Also, of course, you can get your CPE credits. So if you want CPE credits from Worldwide ERC, your GMS or CRP credits, they're up there. If you want HRCI credits or you want SHRM credits, they're also up there. Many thanks to our good friends at Worldwide ERC and indeed our good friends at Rocket Mortgage for helping us get these credits for you. So if you want the credits, I'll leave them up for a moment or two so you can jot down the number, or you can screenshot, or you can take a photo, whatever you want to do. Next week, we've got another really interesting show for you. Next week, we're going to be talking about leveraging generative AI in mobility programs. So if you don't know much about Gen AI, then please do join to find out more about it. And if you do know a lot about Gen AI, then please join in the conversation and help educate the rest of us, because it's a fascinating subject and some really interesting stuff going on. Meanwhile, of course, there is always breaking news. So let's find out what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days. Here we go. So there we are, lots of exciting news there. Congratulations to everyone who has been promoted. Congratulations to everyone who's got a new job. There's lots of job opportunities out there as well. And a particular congratulations to Sian Norman, who just the other day announced her retirement after, I think, over 35 years in our industry, a very well-known and well-liked figure. So she is retiring very, very shortly. So best wishes to her and a long and successful retirement. Meanwhile, we're going to move on. We're going to be talking about immigration, and as ever, super excited. We've got Julia Onslow Cole backstage, who's going to be talking to us about the latest immigration news. And this week, she's going to be focusing in on a country we haven't really focused in on before, but very important. We're going to be focusing in on South Africa. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome to the View from the Top stage, Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hi. So, Julia, you've been traveling a lot in the last week or so, I believe, looking at your LinkedIn posts.
Yes, I've been to the US. We had our partners conference in Phoenix, and we had a celebration in New York for Austin's retirement, which was wonderful at Ellis Island. So appropriate. So such a special night. And then I was in Dallas.
I had no idea that Ellis Island was a party venue, but
well, it
goes to show. Anyway, tell us about South Africa.
Yeah, so really important elections coming up at the end of this month. So I really wanted to keep everyone up to date with what's happening. And thank you very much to Lunga Mani and to Johannes Tiber, who are the head of Africa for Fragment and the head of South Africa. And I really wanted to get the very latest update from Lunga Mani, and he was actually hiking in some very remote mountain, and I actually managed to get him in the middle of this hike. So thank you very much for all of your insights. So this is the most important election by far, I think, that we've ever had in South Africa since 1994. We've got two principal parties, the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. There are actually 70 political parties that are contesting this election and 11 independent candidates. And when I spoke to Lunga, I said to him, I have a hard job keeping in our council elections in the UK. You know, I have a hard job of keeping track of everyone when there's like 7 people. But imagine there's 70 and 11 individuals. And in South Africa, you can actually stand without a party. So there are some really awesome people who are just standing and saying, I'm standing and I want to really represent my community, get crime down. This is what I want to do. But they don't have a party behind them, which actually creates quite a lot of problems when you get into parliament, because they don't have any sort of generic policies about many different things. The other sort of surprise thing that's happened is Jacob Zuma, who's the former president, has founded a new party, and he's running in the election. Now, I did say a couple of weeks ago, I just did a very short update on South Africa, and I said that a lot of people were saying that the ANC might not win this election, but really the feeling on the ground was that actually when it came to the election, a lot of people who are not saying anything because they might be a little bit miffed with some of their policies will come out and vote for them. But I think because of this proliferation of all the independent candidates, I think that, you know, it's likely that it's going to be a much closer thing than previously thought. And
how do we think this might impact us?
So impacting us will be that the ANC has actually produced a couple of really positive immigration processes. One of them is the Trusted Traveller Scheme, Trusted Employer Scheme, which gives incredible benefits to employers if they meet that. You don't have to advertise. You have a much quicker process. You don't have to get your degrees verified. You could do that subsequently. And the second, apart from this, is that they have actually, you know, looked very thoughtfully, the ANC, just generally at border management. Now, I think that if the Democratic Alliance won, which are the other main party, they are also very pro-business. And in fact, you would probably even get some better processes because they're all about bettering the processes and they have backing from a number of US and UK companies. But I think what it means for everybody on this, and this is a theme for all the elections, is that there is likely to be, and we are seeing this already, a lot more audits. And that's because as you get up to the election, and this happens all around the world with every country, it's all the same. The government of the day wants to show a control over immigration and compliance because that is not a vote winner for people who are unemployed. And therefore, what we're seeing in the market is as we've moved towards the election day, we're seeing this big focus on compliance. So the one takeaway from this really is that, you should be sure that you are auditing everything properly and that you wouldn't be worried if there was an audit because we're seeing a lot more audits. And the second thing is that you should really be looking very closely at the trusted employers scheme because it's really, really worth being in that scheme. And at the beginning, it wasn't quite clear what the benefits are, but now the benefits are coming out. It's really worth doing. So those are the two key takeaways.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much as ever. As Gabby says, huge election year in South Africa and in other locations. So many votes across the world. Great insights, Julia. And indeed, they were great insights, Julia. So many, many thanks for that. We're now going to move on to talk about tax. And we have Julie Barron with her colleague, Tina Schrobb, with us. So everybody, you know how it works. Please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say a big, big thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole and welcome onto our stage, Julie Barron and Tina Schrobb.
Hello, Brian.
Hey, let's talk tax.
Let's talk
Julie,
tax.
kick us off. Tell us what we're going to be talking about.
So today, kind of in line with what Stephanie's going to talk about later, Tina's going to talk to us about some employer issues for companies when they have mergers and acquisitions and those type of things. So over to you, Tina.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk about a few different areas, as Julie mentioned, with respect to employment tax implications around mergers, acquisitions, transfers of employees, et cetera. So the first is with respect to successorship. And basically what that means is anytime you have an organization, trade or business, including employees and the related assets that are transferred to another legal entity, basically another federal identification number, either in whole or in part, and the employees continue to perform services in the same capacity that they did previously, the acquiring entity can be considered a successor employer. And this is anytime there's a movement of employees. So it could be a merger, an acquisition, internal restructuring, as I mentioned. And so the successor employer can take credit for the taxable wages previously paid by the prior employer or the predecessor through the date of the transfer. And that's for purposes of meeting the US FICA, Social Security wage-based limit, and the federal unemployment wage-based limit. So the successor employer doesn't need to restart those wages again after the date of the transfer. Similar rules apply for state purposes as well, for state unemployment purposes. The other area is that employers need to consider in these types of transactions, whether they're going to issue one or two Forms W-2 for the year. So in most instances, the employer has the option whether to issue a single W-2 for the year or 2 separate W-2s for the year by each employer. So the standard procedure basically is where both the predecessor and successor employer reports forms W-2 and respective quarterly forms 941, their quarterly payroll tax returns for federal purposes, reporting its own wages and withholding that it reported for the period of employment. So the predecessor would be reporting the wages paid from January 1 through the date of the transfer. The successor would report its wages and withholding from the date of the transfer through the end of the calendar year. This is much easier from a reconciliation perspective. However, employees receive 2 separate W-2s. Sometimes that's not a desired outcome for employers. The employer can still take successor treatment even if they elect to issue 2 W-2s. Either is fine. The alternate procedure is where both organizations or employers elect for the successor to report forms W-2 for the entire year for all employees that have transferred from the predecessor. So in that case, the predecessor would not be reporting W-2s for the portion of the year when it was paying those employees. The successor reports for the full year's wages. The predecessor would still do the W-2 reporting for the employees that didn't transfer. And then what ends up happening is there will be a mismatch between the forms 941 and W-2 for the year. So both the employers would be required to file a Schedule D with their form 941 to reconcile for the IRS the mismatch between the wages and withholding reported under the predecessor and the successor. A few just other things to consider. One is some payroll system limitations that we've seen. So in some cases, employers have challenges in transferring year-to-date balances for payroll purposes in the middle of the year. So sometimes employers can't take successor treatment. The employer does have the ability after the close of the year to go back and get refunds if there's some payroll system limitations. Also, some payroll vendors have challenges with issuing a single form W-2 for the year. So sometimes the 2 W-2s is the easier route to do. And then on the state employment tax side, just a few other things to note. Anytime there's transfers of employees to a new legal entity, the new successor entity may need to consider whether any payroll tax account registrations are required for state and local tax purposes. Possibly account closure forms are required for the previous entity where the employees are no longer working. And notifications are required from the state unemployment perspective. Anytime employees are being transferred to that surviving or successor employer, states do require the notification, which could impact state unemployment tax rates, depending on the state rules. So a lot to sort of unpack there.
A huge amount to unpack, but you've done a sterling job of doing that in this short amount of time that we allow. Such a complex subject. Tina, we really appreciate it. Really appreciate you having on the show and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. Julie, as ever, we appreciate having you as our tax guru, our tax baron. So always great to see you both. We're now going to move on, and we've got a short Benevo update before we then move on to bring Stephanie Ortiz-Manami on to talk about managing ambiguity. So everybody, please, let's say a big thank you to Tina and to Julie. Let's hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button as we say goodbye to them, and we move on to a quick Benevo update. Hey, Matt, how you doing? And you're on mute, Matt.
Well, isn't that the best way to
have this up? Right, there we go. Absolutely. That's the best update ever. Okay, well, it's been great having you on the show, and we're going to move on now. So, Matt, what are you going to talk to us about?
I have some quick ones. So I first wanted to tell everybody, if you haven't been able to check it out yet, please download the 2024 International Mobility Benchmark Report. is one of the most recent reports that the Benevo team has released. It's got a ton of very interesting information in there and meaningful updates from the 2023 report. So that's live and downloadable in the link that Tally will give to all of you live viewers right now. And I also wanted to call out 3 live in-person, in real life events that Benevo is going to be attending. We have the FEM Dallas coming up in the month of May, just 20 days from today. My colleague Kara is going to be attending that, and we would love to meet you if you're also going to be there. We have so that's event number 1. Event number 2 is that alongside the event in Dallas, we're also doing a Tech Connect. So if you would like to, if you're attending FEM in Dallas and you want to get specifically into some technology conversations and see some of the, hear about some of the new things that Benevo is working on, this is a really good opportunity at the Tech Connect in FEM Dallas. And on the Texas theme, we are going to be everywhere in Texas in the coming weeks. Kara is also going to be at the Austin Relocation Council Spring Conference, and that is, of course, happening in downtown Austin. So if you're going to either of those, any of those Texas events, please come and find Benevo.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for that update, Matt. We're now going to be spending the remainder of the show with our star guest. We have Stephanie Ortiz-Minami from Pfizer, previously from CGen, who's going to be talking to us about managing ambiguity. And for those of you who do not know Stephanie, you are going to be in for a delight, an absolutely inspirational global mobility leader. So everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say thank you to Matt Cheek and welcome to our stage, Stephanie Ortiz-Minami. Hey, Stephanie, how are you doing?
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's just great. I've been super excited to have you on the show. So tell us, first of all, whereabouts are you at the moment? Where in the world are you?
I am just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin.
Cool, cool. And tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into mobility? Let's find out a little bit about Stephanie.
Yeah, so I started my career off as an immigration paralegal, and pretty early on in my paralegal career, I identified this whole thing of global mobility, and I made it my goal to be able to break in and to work in-house at helping to support and manage global mobility programs. So I was immigration paralegal for a few years, and then I had an opportunity to join a Brookfield-based company called Fiserv, which is a financial technology company, to help support their.
That's Fiserv, not
yes,
Pfizer.
yes,
Right.
Fiserv,
Okay. Just make sure I understand. So you've gone from Fiserv to Pfizer. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity there to help manage, to help support the program, and then from there I worked my way up through additional positions and across various industries. And then in 2020, I landed at CGen, where I had the opportunity to lead the program.
Okay, so you sort of got into, you sort of were doing immigration and you saw a bit of mobility. You thought to yourself, oh, I'll have some of that. I fancied that. So you segued your career into mobility. Yep.
When I was a paralegal, I had the opportunity to work with some really smart folks, client contacts at across various industries. And I thought their job was just so interesting, and the way that they were able to, so knowledgeable about immigration. I was an immigration paralegal, and just helping to navigate and support employees that worked at their companies. And I thought that's really where I could lend my talent, because my passion is to help people and help support people through immigration processes.
Now, I know when we were chatting earlier, you were telling me that for you, relocation and immigration is personal because of your own family's experience. So tell me a bit about, and we'll tell our viewers about it because we chatted earlier, a bit about, in particular, your father and his experience and how he got to the US. That's an amazing story.
Yep. Well, I'm a first generation American. My mom was born in El Salvador, and she immigrated with her parents and her sister to the U.S. when she was 2. And my dad was born in Mexico City, and he came to the U.S. when he was 16. And both my mom's family and my dad were seeking better opportunities than they could have in their home countries. And they were.
Hang on, let me just get into this. So your mum came at the age of 2. So obviously, she came with her family, but your dad came at the age of 16. So did he come with his family, or did he travel alone?
No, he basically came by himself. We had some extended family here in Chicago when he arrived, but he came here when he was 16. Not much money, but he was determined. My parents both have an incredible work ethic. And that's what has always driven me and my siblings and the sacrifices.
Hang on, who have we got here? Who have we got here?
Well, there's on the left side is my brother Carlos. There's me, and then there's my mom Anna and my dad Bertie.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
So
your dad came.
One of our family.
I'm still getting my.
Yeah.
Sorry, you carry on. Carry on, Stephanie.
Oh no, it was a family trip to Las Vegas. I think we were there at the Hoover Dam.
Okay, but so Alyssa says Stephanie is incredible at what she does and so knowledgeable in her field. So excited to learn from her today. Yeah, we'll get on to the work. So Gab is saying absolutely agree. But I just want to go back to your because I think you told me your dad was one of 20.
Yes.
So he left them all behind, and he sort of came to America on his own. I mean, that blows my mind to sort of do that at the age of 16. That's so gutsy.
One of 20, and he was able to establish a life here. And he spent the first many years of his life in the U.S. in Chicago, and he was able to establish a life. He's been working for the same company for over 40 years now. He works for Charter Steel, and through work and his determination, he was able to bring up some of his brothers who've now established their lives and careers and their families here. So my dad was really, kind of the pioneer in his family, and he sacrificed so much for me, for my mom, for my brother, for my sisters, and for his own siblings to be able to make a whole new life in the U.S.
So, I mean, sometimes, this sort of segues into our main discussion of managing ambiguity, because there comes time in our life, whether it's our work life or our personal life, where we have to deal with uncertainty. We have to make decisions where we don't know what the other side is going to be like. Now, I mean, your dad obviously didn't know what his life was going to be like when he came over. He was moving, classically for a better life, but he didn't know, and he just took that big leap of faith. And I mean, I think when we were chatting earlier, you used a phrase which I thought was really interesting. I'd like you to sort of just ask you about it. You said relocation is always a gamble.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just tell us a bit about your thinking about that, because I don't think we look at it like that.
My dad, he's very hardworking. He's determined. He's courageous. But he also got some lucky breaks. He got lucky breaks along the way. He was able to establish himself a charter, and he doesn't have an easy job. It's a very manual job. He's in the company. He's making steel. So I mean, his working conditions are quite harsh, and he's put his body through a lot. But along the way, he had some lucky breaks. He had people who were looking out for him, who helped supported him. But it doesn't always work out like that for a lot of immigrants who are coming to the U.S. Whether you're working in more of a hard labor job, or you're coming to the U.S. as working in like a tech or an advanced degree field job. There's always that level of ambiguity. There's the gamble. Not a ton of people want to leave their home country and everything that they know for this ambiguity and the unknown in a new country, but they do it because there's an opportunity to create something great. But it takes so much, it takes so much guts to be able to do that. I don't know if I would ever be able to do what my dad did, or do what the employees that I support do. It's really hard.
Okay, so we'll move on to talk about ambiguity and uncertainty, because you've also been through a lot of uncertainty from a corporate perspective, because CGen as a company went through quite a lot of change. I know you had a CEO who stepped down, you had the rumor of a bid from Merck, and then you had an actual bid from Pfizer, and you had a transition. So just tell us a bit about, the uncertainty that you went through in your pre-Pfizer days, in your CGen days.
Yeah, CGen was such a unique opportunity and such a wonderful place to be, because all of the employees, we were just singularly focused on advancing cancer therapies and improving the quality of life for people living with cancer. So when our CEO, when the founder and CEO did step down from the company in 2022, there was a lot of uncertainty of just what the future of the company was going to be. Would we be bought out? Would we continue to be successful without the person who had led us for 20 some years? And CGen employees we got down to it. We were in the trenches together, and we continue to succeed. And yes, there continue to be rumors of possible acquisitions. Merck was one of them that CGen disclosed at the end of last year that Merck was one of the possible acquiring entities, but it turned out to be Pfizer. And it was a historic purchase. I think it continues to be the most expensive acquisition of a biotech company at $43 billion. And that's really a testament to all of the work that CGen employees put in while going through this kind of very ambiguous, uncertain part of our careers and our life at CGen.
Okay, because we've talked about M&A from time to time on this show and other places, and normally we look at it from the acquirer's perspective. They've made the acquisition, what's going to go on. But let's look at it from, your perspective in this case, the target's perspective, because you woke up. Tell us a bit about that morning. I'm guessing you woke up one morning and all of a sudden there was something on the news, or you got an email telling you that a bid had been made. Obviously, the deal hasn't completed or anything. It's just an announcement. So tell us, what's it like when you wake up and this sort of groundbreaking news? So
I woke up one March morning of last year, and like a lot of people, I first thing I do is check my phone, and I had a ton of alerts on LinkedIn. And the news was announced that CGen had entered into a deal to be acquired by Pfizer. And so, I'm in the central time zone, and CGen was headquartered in Bothell, Washington, on West Coast time. So, there's a 2-hour lag. So I quickly logged on to my computer. We had an all company meeting scheduled for later that day, but there were still hours between me waking up and hearing that news and when the company meeting was going to be. So, it was a roller coaster of emotions, of kind of excitement that we knew, CGen knew that in order to advance our therapies, we needed more money. We needed more funding to be able to expand. And then, kind of some fear crept in of, hey, what's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to this program that I've built? And then a little bit of grieving, because like I said, CGen was an incredibly special place, with an incredibly special, unique culture. And it was just, again, that ambiguity of what's to come. What is Pfizer really like, this big behemoth pharmaceutical company scooping up this little biotech?
So at what point were you put in contact with your opposite numbers at Pfizer? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said to me there was 9 months between the date an announcement was made and the date that the deal completed. So you had 9 months of ambiguity.
Yep. Well, because I wanted to secure some more transparency for the employees that our program was supporting, I pushed a little bit aggressively to meet with the Pfizer
Good for you. Yeah.
And so we were one of the, the Global Mobility Program, me along with my leadership, we were one of the first teams in GA to be able to meet with our Pfizer counterparts. So, the first introductory meeting, I'd say, happened either late April or early May of last year. The acquisition was announced in mid-March of so about 6-8 weeks before I was introduced to our Pfizer colleagues.
Okay, so in that 6-8 weeks, I'm guessing, your emails were pinging and your phone was ringing, because in a sort of acquisition situation, the first thing many of us fear is what's happening to our jobs. But
right.
With many of your sponsored people, presumably they weren't just worried about their jobs, they were worried about whether they could stay in the country. So Were you getting a lot of that?
Yep. I had a ton of employees that were reaching out to the team. And at that point, it was just a 2-person team. It was myself and managing the program and a global mobility specialist. So we were fielding a lot of questions. But when I started with CGen in 2020, we had the opportunity to establish a foundation of the program, and when it was centralized under me, the foundation of the program was always transparency. And that transparency built trust and partnership with our employees, and that carried on throughout this ambiguous time of these 9 months before the acquisition was closed. But CGen had a dedicated integration site on our intranet. Included on that integration site was an immigration FAQ that could help answer frequently asked questions for our employees. And then, we had always provided a high level of white glove service to our employees. So that really meant that we had to follow through on responding to questions quickly, having calls with employees when they were needed. What we couldn't, call or answer through email, we had calls. And that level of, I think, attention and sensitivity and empathy to our employees really continued our bond of trust. And, when employees, especially sponsored employees, are faced with this ambiguity of what's going to happen to their job, knowing that their lives are really tied to their employment, there's a high risk that employees could flee CGen. Sponsored employees in key positions that we needed to retain. There was a possibility that we could lose a lot of employees. And I think it's a testament to our program and what we built and how we supported our employees that we only lost 2 employees throughout the entire time before the acquisition was closed.
Absolutely, because moving job at that point, in some ways, is a very sensible risk prevention strategy. Because
right.
If you move job, then you're not going to find you've got the risk of losing your permit. But I mean, I know we talk about trust and transparency, but one of the problems is in these situations, presumably people just can't necessarily be as transparent as they want to. So I mean, that's the problem. I mean,
I think
how do you deal with that? How do you deal with this whole question of trying to be transparent when you can't be transparent, or when you just don't know the answers to the question?
Being in the position of being the entity that's acquired, and CGen being about 3,500 employees, Pfizer being over 80,000, there was the flow of information wasn't coming to CGen. We were sending that flow of information out to Pfizer so that they could do their integration planning, and they could do all of the things that they needed to do for the acquisition from their perspective. So there wasn't a ton of free-flowing information towards CGen. So there were times that employees had questions, and I just had to be really honest with them. And I would tell them, I don't know the answer. I will seek out information, and I will tell you whatever I can. a lot of times that's not a satisfactory answer for somebody when they feel like their livelihood, their family's happiness and security is tied to a job. But I just go back to the foundation of trust that we had built really as a program and culturally as a company, that people did trust us when we said, hey, we don't have the answer right now.
Okay, I've got a ton of questions for you, but out in the audience, if you've got any questions for Stephanie, please do put them in the comments box and we'll try and take your questions. But let me just ask you one question. I mean, obviously we're talking about ambiguity for the assignees, but also presumably there's ambiguity for the mobility team itself and indeed the vendors. Let's unpack them one by one. The mobility team itself, and indeed other departments within HR, which is all being merged. What was that like going through that ambiguity there at that point?
It was difficult. It was difficult for me personally. Like I said, I'm just immensely proud of what we were able to build at CGen, and having this first real opportunity to lead a program and to build it from the ground up. So that ambiguity was incredibly hard, but I put that aside for myself personally, because if I happen to lose my job, I don't have to exit the US. I don't have 60 days to find a new job, have to exit the US, sell my house, endanger my husband's career, uproot my young son. So I stayed focused on the fact that I have this privilege of US citizenship, and I can stay here and I can find a new job. And I've just always had the mentality of, I've been through difficult things before. I always land on my feet, and no matter what the future holds, I'll be okay. And I have the support of my family and my friends. And so I really just laser focused on what I could do for our employees. And that turned into adjusting our strategies, revising our strategies to best support all of the employees that the program was supporting, but really focused on U.S. immigration and putting our employees in the most advantageous position where their permanent residency processes could be carried on to Pfizer without question.
And to what extent were you proactive about it, and to what extent were you reactive? What I mean by that is, were you just dealing with questions from the employees as they came in, or did you reach out to them and say, this is what the situation is, this is what it will mean, can I help you in some way? I mean, it's a hard one, because I know how busy you would have been at this chaotic time.
I think within a couple of hours of things settling in, I went into the mentality of what questions are employees going to have for us. And at that time, there was the other person on my team was a contractor, an immensely talented contractor who's now managing her own program at a solar tech company. But we got on the phone and we started writing out questions. What are employees going to ask? And then I reviewed that with my leadership, saying, what guarantees, if any, can we make? And at that point, we were saying business as usual. CGen, immigration and relocation policies, tax support will continue as business as usual. We're not making any changes to our policies solely based on the acquisition. And at that time, there was, again, some ambiguity of whether or not the FTC would approve the acquisition. There was questions on the FTC was involved in some litigation for other biotechs and questioning acquisition. So there was some uncertainty of what would happen with this and of whether the government would approve. So we proactively were sitting down, just thinking about questions that employees would ask, and then consistently updating our FAQ and putting out timely communications to our employees when we did have significant updates.
And what about merging of policies? Presumably at some point you had to sort of move from CGen policies onto Pfizer policies, or a merger of the two policies. How did that process get handled?
Well, that really happened day one, once CGen became Pfizer. Up until the end, we were still offering, making job offers based on CGen policies and procedures, our comp, our policies for relocation and immigration.
So people then were coming in on, say, like a month before completion on a CGen policy. But people who came in a month afterwards were coming in on a Pfizer policy. So you had legacy employees, presumably on legacy policies. Is that how it all panned out?
Yep. So we do refer to ourselves as legacy CGen employees, and there are employees who are finishing out their relocation policies based on legacy CGen policies. And for immigration, it's been a day one of go forward. If you are hired under, you are now a Pfizer employee, so you adhere to Pfizer immigration policies. But Pfizer continues to be supportive of our sponsored employees and recognizes the immense talent and the critical need for those employees as well.
What about other things like, I'm trying to think of the other things that are going to be important. In this day and age, the whole question of work from home or return to office is very, very topical. Did the two companies have different policies, and did they have to get merged in some way?
Yeah, so CGen had rolled out an RTO policy shortly before the acquisition was announced, and just once the acquisition was announced, RTO wasn't a significant priority for the company. We wanted to make sure that our employees were holistically supported and felt safe and secure, and they could be in the location, whether that was in their home or at the office, where they could be most productive. So the RTO for CGen really wasn't significant. Pfizer does have their own RTO policy, which they've rolled out. I am a remote employee, so I'm not really affected, and not really in the mix with the Pfizer RTO rollout.
Okay. And without breaching any confidences, Carol has asked a question. Can you point out just a few examples of major differences in the two policies? I mean, I appreciate there might be.
So CGen was a small biotech that was starved for talent. So our policies and our benefits were very, very rich, and we were benchmarked to other biotechs. Pfizer is a larger company. It's a huge brand name. There's prestige associated with that, and so they are able to pursue talent in a different way than CGen was able to, and their policies are benchmarked to pharma, which is different from biotech, and pharma is doesn't have as rich policies as biotech. So from a relocation perspective, CGen was a little bit richer. From an immigration perspective, they were more aggressive with immigration support. But those really are just kind of, I think, industry biotech to pharma.
Okay, we've talked about how the announcement of an acquisition can impact the employees and how it can impact the mobility team and the HR function. But of course, every company, and I know we've got lots of viewers who are interested in this, is every company's got its own supply chain. It's got its service providers, its vendors. If we go back to day one of the announcement, when you woke up that day, did you get lots of calls from your various service providers to say what's going on, and how did that get managed? Because presumably, they all sort of in some way consolidated onto, one set of service providers, or I don't know if you carried on with both.
Yeah, at CGen, we were incredibly lucky to partner with, I think, the best in the industry, especially our immigration partner, just the absolute best group of attorneys that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And they offered support. I think we had established such a great partnership and bond in our work that they were primarily concerned with me, with our contractor, just of our future and our job security. And then, immediately moved into what can we do for employees? How can we help you strategize? Let's talk about the impact. So they, key partners who I think they probably understood day one, they were going to lose business because Pfizer has their own vendor partners. But despite that, they kept showing up day after day, working with us, strategizing with us, supporting our employees in the best way possible, day in and day out.
And what about changing the culture of a business? Because, you know, Seagen was Seattle-based, was a pretty young company, whereas Pfizer is New York-based and is well over 100 years old.
Yeah.
So how did the sort of New York culture and the West Coast culture come together? Did it meet in Wisconsin?
No, I think we're still marrying the cultures together. You know, Seagen was 25 years old when the acquisition closed. Still, you know, at 25 years old, we were still really operating as a startup. You know, and just, you know, very relaxed culture. Pfizer is 175 years old this year.
Oh, wow.
A very established, well-known company that's had breakthrough medicines that have changed the world. And I think the really great thing that Pfizer has done is that they made a Pfizer oncology unit now. So we are a dedicated unit, and a majority of Seagen employees have now transitioned to Pfizer oncology. There are some employees that had opportunities to go to other units within Pfizer, but a majority of us are within Pfizer oncology and continue to support cancer therapies.
Okay. And another question I want to ask is, you know, you've lived through this deal, the 9 months, and indeed the uncertainty before that of a company that might be in play. What advice would you give for others, you know, other people who might one day wake up and find out that there's a deal on the table for their employer?
Give yourself grace. I think that's important.
Give yourself grace.
It's really a roller coaster of emotions, and you think about, you know, you put yourself through so much thinking in your head that you put yourself through a lot of stress trying to figure out the unknown and try to come up with answers on your own, and it can kind of get you down. All of this unknown, when you think that you have, when your career is going one direction and now you're not sure where it's going, it can affect your mental health. So I think it's really important to give yourself grace, that this is, understand that this is going to be a roller coaster. And as cliche and as annoying as I think this phrase can be sometimes, you just have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You're gonna feel some uncomfortable feelings. You're gonna feel this uncertainty and this ambiguity, but you just have to give yourself grace. And another one of my favorite phrases that comes from my from UW-Madison, where I went to school, from our football team, is you got to go 1-0, and that just means you can't worry about next week, next month, next year. You gotta focus on today. So make sure that you win today and you go 1-0 today.
Okay, and yeah, I mean, you talked about grace, but how would you actually do that? I mean, what are the practical tips you give to people to help them through that?
Take your PTO. Take your PTO. Work can wait. If go out, you take your PTO. Give yourself mental health days. Do what you can to relax. Remember that the work is one aspect of your identity, and it's not your entire identity. You're more meaningful than your work. You have families and friends. You have hobbies, and I think that we can wrap up our identities so much in our work and really feel like that's primarily who we are. But we're so much more than our work. And so, you know, take your PTO, do what you can to relax, focus on your hobbies, focus on your family and your friends, and plan what you can. Think about things that you can control. You can control when you're going to take a holiday, when you're going to take a little vacation, but you have to understand that you can't control how this acquisition is going to go, of whether or not you're going to continue to have a job.
Yeah, there's some lovely comments that are coming through. Let's just pick up some of these these comments that have come through. So I'll just pick up some of these here. From Gabby, said, "What a solid plan, leveraging communications and self-service to help sponsor the employees." Great points here. So there's some lovely comments coming through from the audience. Tara Hagen, I like it. Go 1-0. Bindu saying great message there. I mean, I think people are really sort of attuned to what you were saying here. But we've got a few minutes left. Let's try and, if you like, complete the circle and roll this back to your personal experience. How do you think your family history, and you being a first-generation American citizen, has impacted the way that you view your role, and indeed how you reacted to the ambiguity and the uncertainty that happened when that bid came?
I think it's fostered this such a deep sense of empathy in myself, to understand that people are coming, that they are leaving their home countries to go to a completely different place with different language, different food, different culture, because they want to seek something new and they want to seek something better and provide opportunities for themselves and their families that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And there's so much bureaucracy and minutia, especially within U.S. immigration. It can be really hard to cut through that noise. But the skill set that I've grown as an expert in U.S. immigration, I'm able to leverage and communicate to employees that of what the next steps are going to be, make it as clear and as simple as possible, despite what they're reading in whatever immigration forum that they've Googled. And I always make it a point to connect with employees and let them know what my personal background is, because I am in the trenches with them. I want to work, I want to support their journeys, and just really cut out all of the noise so that they can focus on their jobs, be productive, and continue to advance therapies for people living with cancer.
Okay, I mean, Stephanie, that's just amazing. And yeah, Robin McKenna says, Stephanie, thank you so much for the conversation and sharing your family story. I said in the introduction that you were inspirational mobility leader, and sometimes people don't realize quite how inspirational they are. And I think, on behalf of everybody at The View from the Top, but all our viewers too, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is such an important story. And I also think, this whole question of looking at ambiguity and uncertainty is so important. It's something that we don't do. I mean, I think people tend to worry a lot about things that they can't impact. And what you're saying is give yourself a bit of grace and go with the flow and take some time off. And there's such solid, practical advice there. That's, Stephanie, really, really appreciate it. I'm going to bring back on stage our other guests earlier. I know Julie Barron had to go, but we've got Tina here, we've got Matt Cheek, we've got Julia Onslow Cole, and of course we've got Tali Gorin. And I just wanted to remind everybody again that this show will be rebroadcast tomorrow. If any of you who are watching the show have got colleagues in Asia Pacific or in Australia, New Zealand, who you think might enjoy the show, please do let them know that from now on in, we are going to be doing a repeat of the show to cover the Asian time zone. We're pretty much out of time. All that really remains is for me to thank you, our wonderful audience, for being with us today, to thank our wonderful producer Tali, to thank Julia, to thank Julie Barron, to thank Matt, to thank Tina Schrob, and above all, of course, to thank you, Stephanie, for sharing with us today. We're back again this time next week when we're going to be talking about leveraging generative AI, Gen AI, in global mobility. So fascinating conversation we've got. That's it. I'm Brian Friedman. I've been your host on The View from the Top. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. Have a great week, and we'll see you all again this time next week. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.